It's Monday morning, and the alarm is already screaming. You reach for it in the dark, before your eyes are even open, and the whole day lands on your chest at once. The commute, the inbox that filled while you slept, the meetings stacked end to end, the messages waiting to be answered, the 10,000 small tasks that never quite finish. You will work today until you are hollowed out, and tomorrow you will rise and do it all again. And the day after that, in a line of gray mornings that seems to run right off the edge of your entire life. And underneath it all sits a tired little question you almost never say out loud. Is this just what being a person is? For almost the entire history of your species, it wasn't. The 40-hour week, the grind that never ends, the deep unspoken belief that rest has to be earned, that to slow down is to fall behind, that a still afternoon is something you have to apologize for. None of that is ancient. None of it is natural. It is very nearly the newest thing about being human. Your kind has walked this planet for something like 300,000 years, and for more than 95% of that time, not one human being alive worked the way you work today. And here is the part that should stop you cold. The people who came before farming, the hunters and the gatherers, the ones we were taught to picture living lives that were nasty and brutish and short, by the measures that actually matter, many of them rested more than you do. They had more hours with the people they loved, more of each day that belonged to no one but themselves. You were raised on a story in which history is one long climb upward, out of toil and hardship, and into comfort and ease. But somewhere on that climb, the hours we work did not fall, they exploded. And it can be traced to a single turn, one thing your ancestors did, one discovery that looked at the time like the best idea anyone had ever had, that quietly cost our species the most valuable thing it ever held. Hold on to that. We will come back to the moment everything changed. First, we have to go back and stand inside the world that came before it. Let's start with an idea that turned a whole science on its head. For most of the last century, the story of the hunter-gatherer was simple, and it was grim. We assumed they lived hand to mouth, every waking hour a desperate scramble for the next meal, no surplus, no safety, no rest, a bare-knuckle fight against starvation that farming, thank goodness, finally rescued us from. It was a tidy story. It was also, when somebody finally went and checked, almost entirely wrong.
In the 1960s, an anthropologist named Richard Lee went to live among the Juansi, a sand people of the Kalahari, and he did something almost no one had bothered to do. He counted. Day after day, he tracked how much time people actually spent feeding themselves, and the number that came back was startling. Getting food took only a slice of their time, a few hours on the days they did it, and they did not even do it every day. The rest was life itself. Rest, talk, visiting kin, long meals, music, stories, the slow and unhurried business of simply being with other people. An anthropologist named Marshall Solins gave the discovery a name that has lasted ever since, the original affluent society. Affluence, he argued, does not have to mean owning a great deal. It can also mean wanting little and getting it easily. And by that second measure, these were among the richest people who ever lived, not because their desires were endlessly fed, but because their desires were few, and the land around them met those few desires without ever swallowing their days. This is not some single dusty study from long ago. Anthropologists have kept going back, decade after decade. James Sussman spent years among the Juansi and came home arguing the same thing, that we have the story of work almost exactly backwards. Researchers living with the Hadza, who still forage in Tanzania today, have found something close to the same shape, that the labor of staying alive leaves long stretches of the day wide open. Different people, different continents, different generations of scientists, the same strange finding, again and again. Now be careful here, because the truth is not a fairy tale. Scholars have argued ever since over the exact hours, and life surely varied from one place to the next, from a good season to a starving one. Some of it was hard in ways a soft modern life can barely imagine, but the heart of the finding has held for 60 years. These were not people grinding themselves into dust merely to stay alive. They met the day's needs, and then, more often than not,
The day was theirs. So picture one of those days. The sun is not an alarm. It's just the sun. You wake when you wake, among bodies you have known your whole life. In the cool of the morning, a group goes out to hunt or to gather, and the work is real. It is walking, tracking, digging, patience, skill. But by the afternoon, there is food, and the food is shared, all of it, with everyone. And then the long gold hours simply open up. No second shift, no glowing inbox, nothing you are quietly falling behind on. There are children to play with, and elders to listen to, a tool to mend, a fire to sit beside, gossip and song and the slow turning of an ordinary afternoon. Tomorrow, you may not need to hunt at all. That was not a holiday. That was a Tuesday. So what happened? How on earth did we get from there to your screaming alarm?
And it cuts deep. Somewhere around 10 to 12,000 years ago, in a handful of places around the world, humans began to do something brand new. They began to farm. They planted seeds and waited. They tied themselves to a single patch of ground and bet their lives on it. And at first, it must have looked like a miracle. More food from less land, enough to feed more mouths than ever before. But farming asked for something in return, and the price was your time. A field is a tyrant. It must be cleared and planted and weeded and watered and guarded from animals and from other hungry people, and harvested in a frenzy and stored and defended all through the winter. The work no longer stopped when the day's hunger was met, because now there was a crop to mind and a surplus to protect, and that surplus could be owned and counted and hoarded and taken. The scientist Jared Diamond once called the turn to farming the worst mistake in the history of the human race. He did not mean that it failed to feed us. He meant that it fed more of us, worse, and that it chained us to our labor in a way our wandering ancestors would never have stood for. And you can read the price in their own bones. When archaeologists line up the skeletons of the last foragers beside the first farmers who came after them, the farmers are often smaller, more worn, marked more heavily by hunger, by disease, by the dull, grinding repetition of the same hard task done 10,000 times over. We bought more human beings, and we paid for them with the bodies and the freedom of very nearly every single one. And here is the quiet, uncomfortable thing at the center of all of this. You are still living inside that bargain. The alarm, the commute, the surplus you labor to pile up for someone else to count, it is the same ancient trade, still running 10,000 years downstream. Somewhere along the way, the work stopped being about the food in your hands and became about a number in an account, a thing with no full belly anywhere inside it to ever tell you that enough at last is enough. The forager knew when the day was done. Do you? That is why the exhaustion you feel can have no bottom. The hunter walked home when the hunting was finished, but you were handed a kind of work that is never truly finished, a tide that comes back in every single night, and then, cruelest of all, you were taught to feel that the endlessness is a flaw in you, that if you are tired, you are weak, that if you cannot keep up, you are the one who is failing.
So if some part of you, on a gray Monday morning, rises up and quietly insists that this cannot possibly be all there is, do not be so quick to shush it. That voice is not laziness, it is not weakness, it is something far older than the world that exhausts you, a memory pressed deep into you across thousands of generations who knew in their very bones that a human life was built to hold far more than work. You come from people who labored for a few hours and then sat down together in the sun. That longing in you for a rest you do not have to earn is not a defect to be fixed. It is the oldest and truest part of you, remembering what your days were always supposed to feel like. You will probably still get up tomorrow and answer the alarm. Most of us must. The world we were born into leaves us little choice. But you can carry one thing back into that gray morning that you did not have before. It's Monday morning, and the alarm is screaming. But now you know what that sound really is. Not the natural rhythm of a human life, and not a fair measure of your worth. Only the echo of a bargain struck 10,000 years ago by people who could not have known its full and final price. And underneath it, quieter, but so much older, the part of you that still remembers a time when the work would end, the food would be shared, and the long gold afternoon belonged to no one in the world but you.